We're back on Andrena. Sam's going to guide us through his little cheat sheet, which I shared on the email. We now have a lot of stuff living in a Google Drive. So there's a link in your email to a Google Drive and then a sublink to the thing. If you have any questions navigating it, just let me know. But it has all of the things that were on the team. Sam's going to use that cheat sheet today, but he's not feeling the most hot. And I'll be doing a lot of the screen sharing. And if we need to stop, we will stop because we don't want to burn Sam out.
Right. Or he might pass out.
No, please don't.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Right.
Okay. So I suppose that it would be a good idea if I shared my screen now. What would you like to have up? Or are you going to share your screen with the Excel spreadsheet?
Let me share with the spreadsheet. Okay. And then once we start talking about species, we can flip back and forth. I think is essentially what's going to need to be happening. Or maybe you would just run the spreadsheet too, but there's so many little categories.
I think it's easier for you to run the spreadsheet so you can scroll through it as you.
Yeah, we can start with that. Okay.
All right, great.
All right.
Take it away.
All right. Thanks, Claire. Yeah, I'm a little under the weather, so I can't even identify bees, it turns out, but I am able to talk. So what we're going to do today is look at the group of bees that traditionally has been in Melandrena, east of the Mississippi, or roughly east of the Mississippi. Currently, there's a lot of flux in terms of the subgenera. So, for example, I believe that Andrena, it begins with a P, perplexa, which has very different pronotal collar, has very strong ears, or what would that be another word for that? Has strong, we'll call them there. We'll call them ears. I'm going to be relatively inarticulate, possibly too. Anyway, they're not smooth. It's not a smooth collar like most of the rest of the species. I believe Confederata also has a bit of a ear or ridge on the pronotal collar. We'll find out when we go through this.
Yeah. So I was actually just working on that yesterday. It's the angle, and it's like scooped out behind the angle there on the ridge.
Okay. So what we have is very similar to the track Andrena Excel file, which is on the left, we have the species in the subgenus Melandrena. We do not add in perplexa at the moment, but later maybe we will. Sorry. The perplexa does vibe, and I have found it in Barbara in particular unit trays before, because a quick superficial look is like, oh, that's Barbara, but it's actually perplexa, and easy enough to tell apart. But if you don't look at the pronotal collar, then not so much. But most everything else, very similar. All right, put that there. And now should see the Excel spreadsheet, correct? Claire?
Correct. And then there's also, I forgot to mention, I'm sorry, and then I'll let you go. I put in the chat 2 links that our friend David Capper has put a lot of work into. One is just his general glossary that we'll probably be referring to today, and his guide specifically for Andrena, which has a lot of really great character pictures on it.
Good. So first of all, this group is often super common. So we have thousands of specimens in some of these species categories, and they all need to be gone through. In the past, there's been a fair amount of confusion based on the identification guides being a little too strict in terms of if it has this, then it's the species, a one character thing. And our approach has been a lot of times these single characters can work, but other times we'll want to look at a suite of characters in case the one character is obscured or as corroboration. So the way this thing is set up is first column, species, the remainder of columns are characters, and within the cells are the states of the characters. And if a species in the front, as you can see, some of them are red. So there's a red, the lettering is red. And that means that there is one character that will pull out, if you can see it, pull out the species from all the rest. So that's something to be aware of and memorize your that character. And we will investigate them because we have many characters to look at. And if we look elsewhere, we see that there is yellow highlighting. The yellow highlighting indicates that this particular character is something that is useful or maybe required in terms of a string of characters to differentiate that particular species from others. If we look at column B, we see that F2 length by width, there's only one species that is both yellow and red. So we see that commoda is F2 has basically equal width and length. Sometimes this is difficult to see, but you can see all the remainder. I'm not sure why pruni and obscuripennis are not there. Perhaps they got inadvertently trimmed, but I think they're also in that boat. I'll have to go update it. In any case, the red indicates like, there you go. If it's 1-to-1, then that's commoda. We'll come back to what commoda likes and doesn't like in terms of habitat and geography, that kind of thing. And then the next column gives other species that could be identified as the species in that row. And again, with commoda, there is one and only one that has 1-by-1 F2 length by width. So really is nothing there that needs to be accounted for. If we look one up, we see, carlini is similar to lupinorum. And when we start looking to the right, we probably see more. And we see, black along the inner edges of eyes, black hairs. So it says face hair color. So there's black hairs along the inner edges of the eye and black upper rear of cheek. So that is super useful and something I use all the time. Label process semicircular and so forth. And then you can compare by hiding or moving things around that species to lupinorum, which is listed down here. Why is it that this species is going to be similar to carlini? And you can kind of compare notes there and see what the differences are using these different colors. So if we just go through, we look at face color, most are pale. There's a couple black that have black on the face. We look at labral process. The subgenus Melandrena has very big labral processes, and the shapes are usually very, I would say, obvious. So you can see Barbara, trapezoid, carlini, semicircular, and so on down the list. Some, it could be either semicircular to trapezoid, so not the greatest character, and you'll see whether it's yellow or not, that if to indicate whether it's helpful. So here you can see, I'm wondering if I inadvertently flipped some of these characters because it says TO. Why would it say that? I'm going to say I should go back, and maybe Claire has this in a better shape somewhere online. That looks like a over time a inadvertent delete. Label process pitting, not something I use that much, but if we're down here in Vicina, we see that a useful character is none to few visible at the rim, but this is largely due to the lack of hairs or crista. So the crista are a little sunburst of hair at that region. So label process margin. So here we can see a lot of the kinds of things that we look at when we look at margins. We see that some are slightly emarginate, so basically slightly concave, entire to slightly emarginate. So in some cases, there is no hollow, there is no concavity to the label process rim. And you can see that a bunch of them have, well, this and that. And there is this one, illini, where we see strongly emarginate to bidentate. So that is useful for helping ID illini and different from most. So we have nivalis, which also is marginate to identate. But look over here, nivalis has some secret character weapon to display for us later. So forth. We see different kinds of categories of things here. Could be a surface, can be useful, but you see there is absolutely no yellow in here. So it's more of a, maybe a double check. Maybe someone said it was useful and we scored it, and then we're like, not as useful as the other people might have thought. Someone can tell us, hey, this actually is useful. Love to hear it. E2 through 3 hair. So we're looking at the tergites, and we're looking at second tergite and the third tergite from the joint with the thorax. And there's 2 things that stand out in yellow. So from Barbara, you see that there are faint hair bands only at the far side. So in other words, it's not a strongly, shall we say, a strongly marked with hairs on the rim species, as some are. It's just faintly, okay? Surface easily visible beneath. So basically you just have more than nothing, and you have more than in the middle, but it's not something that is completely obscuring the surface, and it's at the far sides. When we go further down, we see dunningi, no hair bands whatsoever, and we see among several of the others different kinds of categories of hair bands. Weak to strong there in hilaris. So useful-ish to look at. And when we go to the next one, we have the vertex. So the vertex would be the distance from the lateral ocelli to the back of the head. And this is generally a character of Melandrena in many, but not all cases. So if we look here, we see that most of them are at this level of 2 ocelli or greater. So there's quite a gap between the ocelli and the back of the head, but not all. So again, we go back and look at for our yellow plus red, and we see, oh, confederata is really not playing the game. So it is considered, maybe now it's not, but at least in terms of provisions in the past, it's considered to be a Melandrena. But what we see is the vertex height is only 1 to 1.5 sizes of pitting. And there's other things too, but that's a pretty indicative thing. It's a very short vertex compared to, oh wait, or do I have that? Yeah, it's confederata. So let me highlight that. So here we are, confederata, very short, 1 to 1.5. I have a phone coming on, and I'm going to just let it roll over. I have no way to trim it. Who is calling? 314. I'm not sure what that is. Okay. So, and now it is gone. So when we look at pits on T2, this column here, K, we see how the patterns of pitting occurs on that segment. And there's different things going on here. We have, like you see at the top, base pits average 2 to 4 pits apart, so fairly broad, but there are pits. And then when we look at the depressed area, so this is the part of the rim that is lower by a slight bit, okay? So we often call that, other people call that the depressed area, depressed rim, that is just a good demarcation of the abdomen that is useful as there's stuff usually going on too at these junctures, but it also is something that we can readily see with maybe a little bit of practice. And we can see that, so pits invade, so here we say this happens commonly. Well, there are pits on T2, let's say, because that's what we're looking at. And the pits invade the depressed area, all right, which is reasonably wide, and about 25 to 50% of the way to the rim. So in other words, there are pits on the depressed area of T2, but they don't go all the way to the rim. So there's still a big chunk of the rim that is unpitted. And you can go down and see that we have different things with slightly, not even worth trying to differentiate differences in the dispersion of the pits and how far into the T2 do they invade. And then we go down and we finally get to a yellow one, which says, this is important for, in this case, Confederata. And it says, pits tiny and difficult to see, very unlike the rest of these, and due to high tessellation. So there are tessellations. So when we talk about tessellations, those are the micro lines that crisscross the segment. So shagreening is another word, tessellation, micro, what's that word? Micro lines, small little tiny lines that make the segment skin integument. Excuse me, darn cold. Due to makes the tessellations of the background. And in many cases, not Confederata, right? Confederata, it's a very dull, highly tessellate segment. And that's pretty indicative that you probably are looking at a Confederata versus something where you have some combination of tessellations, but in many cases, it's pretty darn smooth. In other words, there's no tessellation. It's shiny and glossy. Let's see what else we have. Oops, see, that's how things disappear, Sam. So we're gonna put that back. Pits 2 to 4 pits apart and so forth. We keep going down. These are all pretty similar. And here we have illini, base pits average 2 to 4, similar to the above, usually widely invade the depressed area, so widely invade that rim area at about the same density, using more than 50% of the way to the rim. So that's a bit different. So that can be used in the considerations of what species you have. If we look here as we go down, it's similar if we to the general pit densities that everything has. But here with regularis, a northern species, base pits average 2 to 4 pits apart. Okay, that's pretty far apart. Usually only partially invading the depressed area, less than 50% of the way. So that is useful to know in conjunction with some other features for regularis. And we go on to other species. Did I just erase that one? Yeah, I think I have erased a couple things here by accident. We'll have to resurrect them. Okay, sterna hair color. So most of the time, so that's the hair underneath the sternites are white. This is important for carlini. It's white. But here we have a different one, the only one that says black, which is lupinorum. So if it's got black underneath the sternites, it is lupinorum. So that's a nice character. They tend to be small, so beware. When we move down to S8, what we're seeing is the 8th sternite. And the 8th sternite is a wee little thing. It's basically like a small single paddle, often like projecting thing. I don't know how to quite describe it, but it's sticking out. Sometimes it's hidden in the sternites that are depressed. Sometimes it's just in there and you have to kind of look for it amidst many other kinds of things. It's often about the same height as all the other kinds of features, including genitalia, which this is not. Or if it is, it's some ancillary structural part of the genitalia. So I'm going to say it's not. And so the 8th sternite almost always ends as a small popsicle stick with something on the end that can be characteristic. So if we look at S8 and look at, you can see there's all kinds of interesting emarginate, scallop, slightly scallop. A lot of it is not super helpful because it's maybe this, maybe that kind of thing. But then we get to a couple. So illini, straight across or slightly scalloped. So that's going to be useful when, oh, did I miss podium tip and triangle? We'll go back to that. That's going to be useful in the separation of illini from others. And when we go further down, we see a red yellow. So that's an indication that something here is unlike everything else for a species, in this case, nivalis. So nivalis has the tip is bidentate, and basically it's a V-shaped fork. It looks just like this, very similar if you're familiar with Erigeniae males, just a very relatively thin fork, super obvious, not subtle. So if you see that, you know you have nivalis. And then some of these other things are useful in conjunction, but not, as you can see down here, it says fair amount of variation. So if we go back here, yeah, so I missed this. So propodium tip of triangle. And you'll see this is a tricky one. Maybe that I internally decided to skip it on purpose. So if you look from the top at the back of the thorax, you're basically looking at the propodium. There is what is known in Bedom, the propodial triangle. And the tip of that usually, not always, but in Andrena it does, bend down, and the tip, that's a triangle, remember, the tip of the triangle is going to be on the rear face of the specimen. So all well and good. They all more or less do that. There's some that really have lost a lot of the striations, but the Andrena have that propodial triangle, if not with striations, because some of them do have relatively sparse striations. So these are the lines that run from the base to the front to the tip. And so they can have very sparse tips, very sparse striations, but the tip is usually defined by lateral lines. In other words, you can see the edges of a triangle, whether there's striations in there or not. So the key here is the whether that triangle on the backside of the specimen, and this is something where we should probably have more and more. I'm wondering if David Cappert has this. The transition is relatively smooth. In other words, it just is a bent. So like if you took the triangle and bent the tip down, you can make it sharp. In other words, there's a crisp line there, or you can make it just sort of transition smoothly. Most of them have a smooth transition, and a couple have a very abrupt, as if bent like sheet metal. So at the very tip, 7/8 of the way down, it's like clip. We're moving that tip. Yeah.
I stole the screen to share it because this is a particularly good one on his glossary.
Okay. So you're showing it now?
Yep, it's just up on the screen so that there are good visuals as you are comparing them. Nivalis is actually on here. And so not all of these that he has on here are clearly Melandrena, but to give, especially as Sam was talking about the how it bends over to the side, how that affects the proportions.
And it's even there, it's a little difficult to see because you're looking more straight down rather than maybe laterally, or, like, is this it right here or not? Is that a sharp? So remember, it's 7/8 to the tip. So is that sharply defined? Is this sharply defined? This is track Andrena. So yeah, a lot to learn. So again, always worth trips to museums. That's what they're there for. And ask them, beforehand, can I come in and study my Melandrena files? Or in some cases, we have some extras and can pass those out. So.
Okay, giving the screen back to you now.
Great, thanks. Okay, so we're looking at the S8. Well, we looked at the tip, external hair color, S8 margin, wing color. So this is another tricky one throughout all the guides. So when you have large collections of bees, often it becomes apparent when you are looking at large collections of bees, like, oh, some of these have a very dark, dusky wing pattern. And then when you get a little bit involved with them, you find like, oh, these are different species. The problem is that if you don't have comparative thing, then this notion of is it dusky or is it not dusky is ambiguous most of the time. So there are a few cases where it is essentially really dark black. So think, for example, about the bombus group that includes Pervitus, Pennsylvanicus, what's the southern bumblebee, which is, I can't remember, Oricomus. They all, like, they pop in a collection, like, oh, there is this very dark wing pattern. And so that can be like a hint. But if you only had one, then the problem is like, oh, I only have one. Is that really dark or dusky or not? If it's been around for a long time, i.e., the tips are shredded, maybe it's less dark. So it's should be taken with a grain of salt. So here, obscuripennis, very clearly dark brown, but I can't remember which one it is, but let's say nivalis, hilaris, dunningi may also have something a bit dark too. Anyway, so you can see a lot of them don't say clear, they say slightly dusky. So, but again, when you're looking at tons and tons and you're like, am I looking at one or two things, paying attention to the wing color can be useful and be like, okay, I need to look more at this species that is presenting as darker and look for more characters or, send it off. Okay, now at the very tip of, not the very tip, but S6, so the 6th sternite, if you turn a specimen upside down and look laterally, so you're looking at the side of S6, you'll see that there's different shapes going on. So some, and you can see several that are have yellow markings that indicate that this is useful. So Barbara is one that I almost always find useful. It's like, so the tip there of S6, so, depending on how you hold it, if I'm looking at S6, I'm looking at it upside down, so it's raised up, not raised down. So the lingo here can be a little confusing, perhaps. So the raised line at the end, so the tip comes up like this, like the prow of a boat. Okay. Many other species are flat, so there's no raised area in there. And you can see there's, of course, variations. But if you have a strongly raised prow of the boat kind of thing, that's part of your packet of potentially useful characters that's going to help you move towards some things and move away from others. With this group, it pays to not be so black and white. In other words, go through, look at the species that you have and sort of score it for the different characters. And you can copy and paste it down below, or you can mark a whole thing like, oh, it came out to this, but it also came out to that. And then reiterate, like maybe even look at other keys to see, did I nail that or not? And so this becomes something that, and then you can go through all the characters in that line as a validation, a verification. Well, I'm not sure why that came up. So that's S6 rim. And when we look here.
Oh, I'm sorry. Jean pointed out that we weren't screen sharing anymore. I was busy taking notes on my own screen and didn't notice. My bad.
All right. Great. I will. Either it's unimportant or no one is paying attention to anything I say, except Jean, who has been a B Lab hero for decades. Okay, so share content, screen. And open global protect. And okay, we'll go, I don't know, anything here matters. We'll go now to Melandrena males again. And I'm not sure again why this is here. Minimize. Okay, so we were talking about we go back S6 rim, raise, plow like a boat. And then prior to that, we were talking about color of wing, not in this traditional sense, but in the sense of it's still translucent, but darkened in a lot of cases. So you see the difference between dark brown and dusky, a little tricky in terms of absolute. But if you have a long series, you can often see these are different and move them into some of those categories based on wing color, and then keep iterating that. That's the idea, is don't get into I'm keying everything out mode and I will be right, because you won't be. So S6, so there's different shapes to the rim. And now S6 rim, now this is a kind of a tricky one. We put it in there because it does seem to be patterns, but it is definitely down the list of things that need to be considered. What we're looking at is S5, all right, and you have to watch out for confusion. It says in the notes with S7. So when we look at S6, we see it's in comparison to S5. So we're saying height of S6 rim hair less than hair on S5. And it's easy to see the integument. And then we go through these kind of characters. Most of them are not highlighted because they might be useful. In other words, if you look at these, you can see that one particular set of specimens all has this S6 rim presentation, and that's useful for you, but it's not useful in terms of a key. It's like you want to look at that and see if things are lining up. And if it's like, no, these are very different, then you should be thinking that maybe they are different. So down here, we do have a interesting one that I believe Wally LaBerge said, or maybe it was Mitchell, said this species, pruni, very uncommon. But the actuality is, it is a species we see all the time, and it is something that is part of the forest environment, as are most of these things. Most of these species are big, and they are on woody plants, often things like rosaceous plants, and other blackberries, similar things like that. The upcoming not handy bee, but the upcoming Maryland, DC paper that Claire and I are working on, and others, will have a lot of that kind of information to present in terms of actual what species are these things using. Answer mostly often it's woody plants of different kinds. So S6 rim, we look down here, pruni, the basics of it is that they are just, it's very fluffy. And it's the hairs are sort of an S shape when you take a look at them from the side, and they're very pronounced. So way more in terms of their projection than any other species. And so I use that all the time as like, this might be pruny. Oh, it is. And it's common. It's way more common than people initially thought. So
Okay, I'm gonna, before we go too much farther, because we're like about halfway through your spreadsheet, and we're going quickly, so I haven't been able to pull up quick pictures quite too fast. But so, are there questions? They're not in the chat. Let's give Sam a break for a second so I can pull up pictures that you guys want. So you can unmute, or you can put it in the chat if there are features that we've gone through that you would really like to see on the screen, and I'll try to pull them up.
And we can come back next week, as we almost certainly will, to go through each species in detail, rather than, oh, look at this one, it's got this, and give a sort of a completer assessment, notion, ID,
Yes, for sure.
whatever, for a species when I'm more coherent, hopefully.
Yes, that is also a plan.
Yes.
We've gone through a lot of broad characters and questions, comments.
It's a lovely group, but one that causes anxiety sometimes. Should we go on?
Yes, nobody has indicated, and we've given it a few amount of time. So
okay. And then people.
Oh wait, can you show the triangle abrupt dip? So you mean the propodial?
Yeah. I don't have that. I think you have that with David Keppert's or not? Or do we have to go get it special for next time? It
Let's
should be
see.
there, right?
Oh, so by the way, the labral process, I put that in the chat. Really good pictures on here. As I scroll, you see a sense. So is this what you mean? The different abrupts here or in the curved? Matthew?
We can come back.
Oh, no,
People
Mike.
can ask questions. People can come back and ask very specific questions that we can gather together and express.
Yeah, I'll make sure that we have some for podium bees next time.
Okay.
All right, well, let's jump back to Sam, and I can always screen share again. Just put it in the chat, or you guys can also interrupt.
Great, and we can add it to our various guides. It'd be nice to have all the Melandrena male with pictures, right? And illuminating all this. Fair amount of work, but that's where we want to go. Okay. I'm gonna click there. And now we, I think, are back, and we will go to the Melandrena. Okay. So we now are looking at S4 hair patterns, and that was different from the S. Well, no, we didn't talk about that. S6 rim hair. So we have this weird situation where the pruni is just basically a little big fluffy hairdo that really stands out. This next one, length of branches on hairs on S4, given in diameters of the main trunk of those hairs. So what's going on here on S4, there are hairs and they are longish. And I would say all of them have branches, not super dense, but some branches nonetheless. And in the scheme of things, some species have very short branches, and you'll see here that our measurement is in lengths or widths of the main stem. So we have 1 to 2, 1 to 3, that kind of thing. And then we have some more hairy, I would call them, specimens where the length of the hairs are 5 to 6. So they're or 3 to 5, and that can be useful. It's difficult because absolutes here are hard, but if you're trying to figure out things and you have a whole series, it'd be like, oh, this is much more hairy underneath than this one. That could be a clue. And here are some cluelings. Okay,
Sam, how does one measure the width of the hair trunk shaft? What mag is needed?
So I would say, so the kind of microscopes I generally use, what is my ultimate magnification? So I have 60, a 60x here, because I have a 10x ocular, and the little rotating knob gets to 60. Many people have less than that, like 40 some. And if you're doing Bausch and Lombs, you usually have, again, 10x oculars, and then you have a 0 to 30, 0 to 35, maybe not 0, but up to 35, maybe 40x. So you multiply the two together. So in general, I don't even know what I have at home. They're all used microscopes. I would say you probably can get away with seeing these kinds of things at the level of 40x. You have to, jack it all the way up and spend some time looking at it. 60x, probably better. I do at times run the magnification way up, but a lot of the times I don't. So a lot of my general observations and work with the microscope is at a, let's say, a 30x kind of situation, maybe a little more, maybe a little less. And the reason for that is I can see more. Like I can find what I'm looking for, and I can see the area in relationship to the rest of the area. So 60x is great if you're really dialing in, not necessary. If you have options, like what should I get? Then I tell people get a 60x. You won't be disappointed, and you most of the time will probably be using less of a magnification. Does that make sense? Okay. We can come back to that if people want. So S4 hair pattern. So when we look at S4 hair pattern here, it's another thing. So on the S4, so the fourth sternal character, when you turn it over and look at it, you'll see that so when we talk about the hair along the rim, often there are two sets of hairs. It depends. One set of hairs is relatively long, and another set of hairs could be absent, or it could also be long, or it could be dense or not dense. So this is an attempt to codify or illuminate what the S4 hair pattern might be. And you can see here, Confederata, again, has a set of, this is again something that only Confederata has a set of short weakly plumose hairs that line the rim, so right along the rim, that are about the same length on the hairs. I don't know if that's the proper wording, about the same length as the hairs on the rest of the segment. In other words, they're not longer. Most of these other species have longer hairs. Like the hairs are, clearly, let's call them longer than the other hairs on the rest of the segment. And then it goes on to say there is no obvious latitudinal row of long hairs. All the remaining hairs, let's click on that. So in other words, there's not two sets. And so there's no obvious longitudinal set of long hairs that where all the remaining hairs are similar in size and scattered sparsely across the segment. So basically it's a segment, a hairyish segment. Hairs are not too long, and there's no differentiation between the hairs. They all are about the same size. And that's unique to Confederata. We look at everything else, and often there's like here, single, let's look at this one, has a set of short weakly plumose hairs that line the rim. These are about half the length of the long hairs found just behind that row. Two sets of long hairs, and then it says relatively hairier. So, and so forth. So again, trying to codify some of these things about these specimens. So when we look at S4 one more time, this is something that I believe Mitchell really obsessed on. So in terms of differentiating the different species. So if you turn them over, S4, so sometimes there's pits that are uniform throughout the whole segment, and sometimes there's pits that are only on the rim of the segment. And those are useful for splitting out the species if you can see them, because a lot of times S4 is hidden or crumpled or all that. The next thing, labral transverse lines. This is mentioned by LaBerge, and I have to say, a difficult time really seeing these patterns. So I've sketched in some notes, but I am not confident that I'm representing these well. Anyone else can pipe up, let me know. And then there's just some special features that some species have. So Barbara, we say here, dunningi and Barbara have relatively narrow S8 end structures. So that's that popsicle stick thing. Barbara's general hair tends to be white, while dunningi's tends to be yellowish in terms of differentiating two similar things. And when we go to the next, so at carlini, while difficult to describe, the S8 and nearby structure has dense hair that probably projects rearwards toward the abdomen tip at right angles to the tip of oops, of S8 often having an orangish cast. You just have, this is not a difficult species. It's also super common. When you start looking for it, you can see this orangish cast fuzzy thing at the tip of S8, and it's a good character. But the species is easy to identify from many other things. Commoda says a little note, tarsal segments and parts of tibia often orange. And here, dunningi hairs, usually with a yellowish cast, so not the white of Barbara. Hilaris, bases of hairs on T6 with a strong yellow cast, so another yellowish thing, and bases of hair on T6 only, so that's the very end. And we have also illini, noticeably yellow hairs. Down here, when we're looking at regularis, bases of hairs on T6 with a white to off-white cast. So that's near the tip, or basically the tip of the specimen. And we go down to sei, tricky one, because mostly it's identified, very plain Jane, by the abrupt tip for that species, and it's not apparently common. S8 is very flat, wide, and sharp outer edge. Might be a good character, not sure about other species. So this is just a note to look at this uncommon species and see if that can be there. Vicina, which is a common species, surprisingly difficult. So there's information on S4 pitting, but also T6, the very tip, often with a chocolate brown cast to the hairs. Often you have to look to the side, not black, sort of a chocolate brown, giving an indication of Vicina. That's it. That's what I got. And we can talk about those characters, and we can come back next week and go species by species and talk about species things. You know, like, let's put it all together instead of really focusing on the individual characters.
Sam, would you mind scrolling up a little bit? The copy of the spreadsheet that I have does not have that little commoda thing. There we go. I'll type that tarsal segments and
Okay.
parts of tibia often orange into the Google Drive
That is a
one, so
good one.
everybody has an update.
We should compare notes, Claire, because I think I use this all the time, and I think, you know, you highlight something and then you hit a tab and it's gone. So I think there's several other things that should be repatriated. Yes.
Great, we can do that.
Okay. I'm ready for a nap. Probably everyone
Yeah, I
else
think
is.
we should let you go. You just did a lot of walking through. I think we kind of addressed the features that were in the chat. Anybody else here for some clarification of any of these features before we do a lot of one by ones next week? Speak now or forever hold your peace until next week. You're getting a lot of support for nap time. So
naps.
Why don't we just let you go now?
Thanks. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Sam. That was a lot. You're good. You are
a
champion. We approve of you.
Okay, whatever. I'm just going to sleep now. Okay, bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.